For years, the walls of Windsor had held their secrets well. They had absorbed the whispered arguments behind closed doors, the stifled tears in gilded hallways, and the carefully constructed smiles worn for the cameras. But castles, no matter how ancient or formidable, cannot hold back the truth forever. They shake when foundations crack. And on a gray November morning, as Kate stepped out of a sleek black car and onto the gravel of the long walk, the earth beneath the monarchy began to tremble. Kate Middleton had always been the monarchy's greatest asset. The former commoner who had captured the heart of the future king, she was the picture of grace under pressure. She had spent over a decade learning to keep her head down and her expression neutral, even when the weight of the crown felt unbearable. But the woman who walked toward the palace gates today was not the same Duchess who had left London 3 weeks ago. She had been visiting an old family friend in the Scottish Highlands, a retreat intended to give her and the children some quiet time away from the endless cycle of royal duties. But the trip had taken an unexpected turn. A chance meeting with a retired palace staffer, a woman named Margaret who had served the royal household for over 40 years, had opened a door Kate never expected to walk through. Margaret was frail now, living in a small cottage near the estate where Kate was staying. She had reached out through a mutual acquaintance, claiming she had something important to share with the Princess of Wales. Initially, Kate was hesitant. She had spent her entire royal life avoiding controversy, learning to smile and wave while keeping her true feelings buried deep inside. But something in the old woman's voice, a tremble that spoke of secrets too heavy to carry alone, compelled her to agree. Over 3 afternoons, with rain tapping against the cottage windows and a fire crackling in the hearth, Margaret unraveled a tapestry of deceit that had been woven over decades. She spoke of Camilla not as the queen consort the public saw, but as a woman who had long viewed Kate as a threat to her carefully constructed position. "She was jealous from the moment you entered the picture," Margaret had said, her weathered hands wrapped around a teacup. "She saw how the public loved you, how William looked at you. It reminded her of everything she could never have back in the beginning." Kate listened in stunned silence as Margaret detailed years of subtle manipulation, negative stories planted in the press, moments of private cruelty disguised as advice, and a systematic campaign to ensure that Kate never felt truly secure in her role. Margaret produced letters, diary entries, and recorded phone calls that spanned decades. The evidence was undeniable. "She used you and Meghan both," Margaret continued. "Pitted you against each other while she stood back and watched. The crying incident, the one they blamed on Meghan, that came from her. She leaked it to distract from her own scandals." The revelation hit Kate like a physical blow. For years, she had carried the weight of that moment, the awkwardness and tension it created between her and Meghan. She had been told to remain silent, to protect the institution, but now she understood that the institution had been protecting Camilla all along. Now, as Kate approached the private entrance to the palace, she clutched a leather satchel against her side. Inside lay copies of Margaret's evidence, enough to shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but her face remained composed. She had learned to hide her emotions well. Today, that skill would be tested like never before. The private drawing room where Camilla received guests was decorated in soft creams and golds, designed to feel welcoming while reinforcing the status of its occupant. Camilla sat in a high-backed armchair near the window, a cup of tea cooling on the table beside her. She looked up as Kate entered, thus her expression shifting from mild surprise to careful warmth in the space of a heartbeat. "Kate, darling, you're back early. I thought you were staying in Scotland until the end of the week." Kate closed the door behind her and stood without moving further into the room. She didn't sit. She didn't smile. Something came up that couldn't wait. Camilla's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Years of navigating royal politics had honed her instincts. She could smell trouble the way a fox smells hounds. Really? Is everything all right with the children? The children are fine. Kate's voice was calm, measured. This is about something else entirely. She crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate, and sat in the chair opposite Camilla. For a long moment, the two women regarded each other, the queen consort who had waited decades for her crown, and the future queen who now held its darkest secrets in her hands. "I met someone in Scotland," Kate began, "an old friend of the family, though it turns out she was more than that. She served in this household for over 40 years. She remembers things. She kept records." Camilla's teacup paused halfway to her lips. For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Fear, quickly masked. "I'm not sure what this has to do with me. Her name is Margaret. Does that name mean anything to you?" The teacup rattled slightly as Camilla set it down. "Margaret? The housekeeper? She's been retired for years, a sweet woman. But she was always a bit fanciful. You know how staff can be, imagining dramas where none exist." She wasn't imagining anything. Kate opened her satchel and withdrew a folder, placing it on the low table between them. She had proof. Letters you wrote, notes from phone calls, recordings of conversations. Camilla's face drained of color. For a moment, the carefully constructed mask of the gracious queen consort slipped, revealing something colder beneath. "I don't know what you think you have. I know about the stories you planted when William and I first got engaged, the ones questioning my family's background, my mother's business, my suitability as a future queen. I know about the briefings against Meghan, the crying story, the wedding tiara incident, every negative headline that made her look difficult while you played the kindly stepmother." Kate's voice remained steady, but her eyes blazed with years of suppressed anger. "I know you saw us as targets. If the two duchesses were constantly at war, if the press was focused on us, then no one would look too closely at your past or question your place in this family." "Targets?" Camilla's composure cracked. "You think I saw you as targets? You who walked into this family and had the public fall at your feet without lifting a finger? You have no idea what I went through. The years of being vilified, called every name imaginable, while your Diana was turned into a saint. I fought for every scrap of acceptance I have. And then you and Meghan arrived, and suddenly I was invisible again. So your answer was to destroy us? I was protecting myself." Camilla's voice rose. "Do you think anyone else in this family was looking out for me? Charles loved me, yes. But he was always distracted, always pulled in 100 directions. I had to secure my position any way I could. By lying, by manipulating, by turning women in your own family against each other." Camilla stood abruptly, moving to the window with her back to Kate. Outside, tourists pressed against the palace gates, snapping photos of the guards, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside. "You don't understand what it's like to be hated by an entire country, to have your face on tea towels with X's over your eyes, to be blamed for the breakdown of a marriage that was broken long before I entered the picture. I understand what it's like to be judged for things I didn't do," Kate replied quietly. "I understand what it's like to have every gesture analyzed, every outfit criticized, every parenting decision questioned. The difference is, I never tried to tear anyone else down to build myself up." Camilla turned from the window, her expression hardening. "What do you want? Money? Titles? Guarantees for your children's future? You already have all of that." "I want the truth to come out." "That would destroy the monarchy." "No. Kate rose to face her. Lies destroy the monarchy. Secrets destroy the monarchy. Using innocent people as shields to protect yourself, that destroys the monarchy. The truth may be painful, but it's the only thing that can save this family. For a long moment, they stood locked in a silent battle of wills. Then Camilla laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. You're even more dangerous than I gave you credit for. All these years, playing the quiet, dutiful Duchess while you waited for the perfect moment to strike. Kate shook her head slowly. I wasn't waiting. I was trusting. I believed that this family, for all its flaws, had my back. I believed the people around me had my best interests at heart. Margaret's proof didn't just show me what you did. It showed me how alone I've been all along. The door opened behind them. William stepped in, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as he registered the tension crackling between the two women. Kate? I didn't know you were back. Is everything... He stopped, looking from his wife to his stepmother. What's going on? Kate held Camilla's eyes for one heartbeat longer, then turned to her husband. We need to talk. All of us. Charles, too. The family meeting that followed was unlike anything that had ever occurred within those historic walls. There were no advisors, no press officers, no carefully rehearsed statements, just raw emotion and long-buried truths forced into the light. Charles listened in growing horror as Kate laid out the evidence. William's face cycled through shock, anger, and disbelief. Camilla sat rigid, offering no defense, knowing that anything she said would only dig the hole deeper. When Kate finished, the silence in the room was absolute. Outside, the distant sounds of London traffic drifted through the thick windows. A clock ticked somewhere in the hallway. The castle itself seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Charles spoke. His voice was hoarse, aged by the weight of what he had heard. Is this true? Camilla? She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was barely a whisper. I did what I thought was necessary. Necessary? William's voice cracked with anger. You destroyed relationships. You poisoned my wife against my brother's wife. You made our family a battlefield. I made you stronger. Camilla lifted her chin defiantly. Kate learned to navigate this world because she had to. Megan was never going to last. She was too fragile, too demanding. I saw that from the beginning. You don't get to decide who lasts and who doesn't. Kate's voice cut through the room like a blade. You don't get to play games with people's lives because you're still fighting battles from 40 years ago. Charles held up a hand, silencing them both. His face was ashen, and the weight of the revelation settling into the lines around his eyes and mouth. What happens now? It was the question none of them had dared to ask. What happened when the truth about the Queen Consort's manipulation came to light? What happened when the public learned that the supposed rivalry between Kate and Meghan had been manufactured by the woman now sitting beside the king? Kate looked at William, she looked at Charles, and finally, she looked at Camilla, the woman who had schemed against her for over a decade, who had treated her as an obstacle rather than family. I don't want to destroy the monarchy, Kate said quietly. I never did. But I won't live a lie anymore. And I won't let my children grow up in a family where manipulation and deceit are accepted as normal. She picked up the folder of evidence from where she had placed it on the table. Margaret gave me these because she believed the truth mattered more than protecting the institution. I'm not going to release them to the press. I'm not going to destroy you publicly. Relief flickered across Camilla's face, quickly suppressed, but not quickly enough. But I'm also not going to pretend anymore. Kate turned to Charles. From now on, things change. No more private briefings against family members. No more using the press as a weapon. No more treating anyone who enters this family as a threat to be neutralized. And I want an apology. Not for me. For Megan. For the years of lies that painted her as the villain when she was just trying to find her place in a family that never gave her a chance. Charles nodded slowly. That's fair. It's not fair. Camilla's voice was sharp. It's naive. You think an apology fixes anything? You think the press will suddenly decide to be kind? This family survives because we present a united front, because we control the narrative. No. Kate faced her with a calm that was somehow more intimidating than anger. This family survives because people believe in it, because they want to believe in something bigger than themselves. But that belief has limits, and you've been testing them for years. She tucked the folder back into her satchel. I'm keeping these. Not as a weapon, as insurance. If I ever find out that you're still playing games, still manipulating, still treating family members as enemies, I won't hesitate. The truth will come out. All of it. Camilla's face contorted with barely suppressed fury, but she said nothing. What could she say? She had been outmaneuvered by the woman she had underestimated for years. William crossed to stand beside his wife, his hand finding hers. It was a small gesture, but its meaning was clear. He stood with Kate. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The meeting ended without resolution, without declarations of forgiveness or promises of change. Some wounds were too deep to heal in a single conversation. But something had shifted. The power dynamics that had governed the family for decades had realigned in the space of a single afternoon. As Kate walked through the palace corridors toward the car that would take her home to Anmer Hall, she felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of secrets she hadn't even known she was carrying had been lifted. She had spoken truth to power and survived. The castle had shaken, but it still stood. Whether it could be rebuilt into something stronger remained to be seen. But for the first time in her royal life, Kate believed that change was possible. She thought of Megan, thousands of miles away in California, building a new life far from the family that had failed her. She thought of the apology Charles had promised, too late for so many things, but perhaps not too late to begin the long work of healing. And she thought of Margaret, alone in her cottage in Scotland, finally freed from the secrets she had carried for 40 years. Though Kate made a mental note to write to her, to thank her for the gift of truth, however painful it had been to receive. The car pulled away from the palace, leaving the tourists and the guards and the ancient stones behind. Kate watched it recede in the side mirror, knowing she would return, knowing she had a role to play and a family to help heal. But she would return differently, stronger, wiser, no longer willing to be a pawn in someone else's game. The castle had shaken, but Kate had found her footing. And that made all the difference. In the weeks that followed, the ripples of that confrontation spread outward in ways both expected and surprising. Charles, true to his word, reached out to Megan through a private intermediary. The response was cool, cautious. Trust, once broken, could not be restored with a single apology. Oh, but it was a beginning. Camilla retreated from public view for a time, citing exhaustion. The official statement spoke of a minor health concern requiring rest. Those who knew the truth understood it differently. She was licking her wounds, regrouping, trying to understand how she had lost control of a game she had played so expertly for so long. The press, sensing a shift they couldn't quite explain, began treating Kate differently. The carefully cultivated narrative of the perfect Duchess, who never put a foot wrong, gave way to something more complex, a woman of substance and steel, capable of far more than smiling and waving. Kate herself changed most of all. She still fulfilled her duties with the same grace and dedication as before, but there was something new in her eyes, a confidence that came not from position or privilege, but from knowing who she was and what she stood for. She began speaking more openly about the challenges of royal life, about the importance of mental health and family support. Not directly about her own experiences, she was too careful for that, but in ways that made clear she understood the pressures faced by anyone entering the institution. And she reached out, quietly and privately, to others who had struggled, young women marrying into aristocratic families, unsure of their place, spouses of diplomats navigating unfamiliar cultures, anyone who might benefit from knowing they weren't alone. The folder of evidence remained in a secure location, untouched, but not forgotten. Kate hoped she would never need to use it. She hoped Camilla had learned her lesson, that the years of manipulation were truly behind them. But she was no longer naive enough to assume anything. Trust, once broken, had to be earned back. And some trusts, she knew, might never be fully restored. The castle still stood, ancient and magnificent, housing centuries of history within its walls. But it was different now. The secrets that had festered in its shadows had been dragged into the light. The power dynamics that had governed it for generations had shifted. And Kate Middleton, the commoner who had become a princess, had found her voice. Not to destroy, not to revenge, but to build something better, something truer, something worthy of the family she had married into and the family she was raising. The castle had shaken when Kate came back, bearing Camilla's concealed truths. But from the rubble of those revelations, something new was beginning to emerge. And not a perfect monarchy. Such a thing had never existed. But perhaps for the first time in a long time, an honest one. Margaret passed away peacefully that winter, surrounded by a small collection of family photographs and the satisfaction of knowing she had done the right thing. Kate attended the funeral quietly, without fanfare or press attention, standing in the back of the small country church as the woman who had changed everything was laid to rest. Afterward, she walked alone through the churchyard, reading the names on weathered headstones, thinking about all the stories buried with the people who had lived them. How many secrets still lay hidden in graves across the country? How many truths would never be told? But some truths, at least, had escaped their prison. Some stories had found their way into the light. And because of one brave woman's decision to speak, the future would be different. Kate placed a single white rose on Margaret's grave and walked back to her car. The castle was waiting, her family was waiting, and she had work to do. The work of building something true never really ends. But for the first time, Kate believed it was possible. And sometimes, that belief is enough to change everything.